You are about to experience SNYDER Presents. We will examine the life of our master Yeshua by discovering his ancestors, family, and friends, by reviewing rare ancient manuscripts, and speaking to those who know him best. From the Vero Essene Yahad, now experience SNYDER Presents.
Welcome tonight to Hearing Voices. I think this is about the 27th segment of this series, and it's been quite a ride. We've been trying to discover the roots of all kinds of human problems, human expressions, human feelings and personalities, prisons that we're in, how we can get out, what Yahweh can do for us as far as bringing us to the point in destiny where he would have us at this very time.
And don't forget what we can do for him and his kingdom at this very time. Well, that's very important.
Yes, I agree with you. It is very important. Someday we need to get you on here with some of your war stories. Those are very important for us to remember, too.
Oh, you've been saying that now for 5 years.
Yeah, and I'll probably be saying it for the next 5 years, too. Tonight, I've got a special guest who consented on coming on as long as he could be anonymous. So I'm going to ask you, if you happen to know who this is, don't call him by name. We won't be seeing him on the camera. And when I edit this, I will disguise the voice. So I wonder if my guest is on here tonight.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, you're Allison Chains?
Yeah, just for the night.
That's cool. Allison, you told me a story some years ago that made a great impression on me. Do you remember that story? I mean, it was a long time ago. I wouldn't fault you if you couldn't.
I probably can if you give me a little bit of help. I got a lot of stories, maybe.
All right. Well, this one was a couple guys in a deep, dank cell someplace. And somebody in a white sheet came in. That's what I remember of it. You remember that one?
Absolutely. And I was actually going to chapel in the jail, and there was the regular pastor was there, and this was an old Catholic-looking building with stained glass windows. It was a nice place, and I would go there every Sunday for chapel. And I just remember the pastor saying that he had a special speaker coming in, and I just thought, well, there's nothing special about that, until he started saying that this guy was Jewish and he believed in Jesus. And so I just thought, oh, good. So he knows the truth. And I just let enough alone. And then it was the next week that I went. And I remember that this guy was supposed to come, and I remember he was supposed to be a Jewish believer. So I was thinking, okay, as long as he believes in Jesus, it's going to be cool. So I'm standing there and, looking around, and this guy comes walking in. He had a long white robe on, some generic shoes. His face was pretty disformed. He had a beard. He had a huge Bible in his hand. And he came in, and I was looking at him like, oh, boy, look at this guy. And he asked if he could pray, and he did. He prayed, and at that moment in time, you could feel the Holy Spirit come into the room, and everyone was silenced, and this guy took the show. I remember him specifically praying in Hebrew. Later on, I found out that his name was Mikhail, and that's all that I know about this gentleman, except I do recall being told that he was the head of Catholic studies in a well-known university, and he was Jewish at the same time. So later on, after his teaching, I had to put all this together to understand what had happened and what impact this messenger had on my life later. So trying to piece that all together. But I do remember that when he spoke on the early believers. He never used the term Christians, and he mentioned multiple sects of Judaism within the time, and he was dealing with a very uninformed group of people. And you could tell that it was only through the power of the Holy Spirit that he was keeping this very simple. But I do remember when he spoke that my understanding was being opened, and he opened up my mind to heavenly realms as he spoke. And I don't know if he had that impact on other people, but I certainly remember that part where I knew this was a special encounter because everything that he spoke gave me revelation. And the first thing he spoke about was Rome killing the first century believers and burning them at stakes. And he explained that their love for the Creator, and more importantly, the Creator's love for these believers, was so powerful that they knew that in this age, that their faith was so precious, they knew that there was this age and the age to come, and that they were not scared at all because they knew what was to come after this age, that they would be with him no matter what happened. That was his main point, was absolutely the resurrection, and that there is here and now and then and there. And so he kept it very basic, but it changed my life. And in my spirit, when he spoke, I knew that I didn't like Rome. And that was the only thing that I can say that I took away immediately, was a distaste for Rome. And later I found out through various encounters about, the Roman Catholic Church and so on and so forth.
He was the head of Catholic studies at the university, and he was a Jew?
Yes. Amazing as that is.
What were you doing in jail in the first place?
I had been introduced to heroin at the age of 16, and by the time I was 18, I had gone in for a string of retail thefts. I think it was around 28 or 40 counts. I don't remember. It finally caught up with me, and so I ended up in jail at that time. I think I was doing about 6 months at that time.
Were you able to take what he said concerning resurrection and apply it to your particular situation rather than an afterlife, that in this life you might have something after this wrap?
I knew that what he was saying was going to come into play. It changed my life considerably as far as wanting to know more about who these people were that were able to face the flame. Mm-hmm. And I wanted that kind of faith. I didn't know if it was going to be me someday that would have to face that. And possibly, I don't know. In my spirit, I knew it's possible.
You must have been a believer at this time, to some extent.
Yeah. See, well, with the way things have happened with me, it's been a lot of bad experiences, but at the same time, I see Yahweh intervening throughout my life, even from a young childhood. So he would reveal himself to me throughout times, and I would always seek him during times of trouble, and I'd always looked for a way of escape because I opened the door to heroin addiction, which I did come to find out later was not like marijuana or anything else that I had tried. I assumed it was kind of the same until one day I learned the difference.
Do you think you can be a believer and at the same time be a heroin addict and do robberies? I imagine to keep the habit going. Can you believe and be doing those things?
I think if you have at that time I didn't understand Torah, and it was all I was getting was grace. I knew that I needed to have a savior. I believe people can definitely accept salvation, but living it is a different thing. When you speak of actual addiction, I'm kind of unique in that case. I haven't been actually strung out on heroin in over 15 years. I have played with it here and there, but never to the extent of being strung out. But going back to your question, yeah, I think people can backslide. They can backslide in heart, and when you backslide with something like that, it's going to take you for a ride. It isn't any different than pornography or something else less powerful. I mean, each person has their own chains, and a chain is a chain. It's just that one will kill you quicker than the other. That's my view.
Well, it seems like when you get a talk about some of the early believers, especially those in the first century, Joshua, he had some pretty rough characters there that were following him. There was an assassin. a zealot. Those are two that I know of. And there are probably a couple more that had certain things said about them, like Matthew, probably an embezzler and a quisling. These were rough guys. But what I hear all the time is that, well, that was before they were converted, like Paul. But you're saying that perhaps it's possible to believe through these things, and maybe you might drop your faith for a while, but it sounds like what you're saying is that he doesn't drop his faith in you.
Ironically enough, I would agree with what you said. I would say even after Kepha or Peter he was a disciple for quite some time when he cut off that centurion's ear. So he wasn't, whether or not that was something that he should or shouldn't have done, he still did it. I'm sure that was part of his, however it is, whatever he struggled with. Maybe it's a bad example. But one thing I know that is if you have a calling and a purpose, then I do believe that divine intervention will continue to come up. How many chances you get, I don't know. I think I should have ran out a long time ago. But in the face of death, I'm here right now. And at my age, I'm taking this one serious. Even though I've had a lot of experiences, my last episode was one of the most mind-blowing and the realest encounter I've had with dying, because when I was a teenager, I didn't much care, thought I was invincible, and pretty much was. At least when it came to the drug addiction, I wasn't scared to do them, although I had some strategy. I didn't go into anything blind, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't take much playing around with those kind of drugs. It doesn't take much. It can take your life quick. And in this day and age, it isn't even the same drugs that I grew up with. It's something totally other than, and that's what I encountered. That would be the fentanyl.
Fentanyl.
So,
I imagine with a drug like fentanyl and heroin, that probably when you're under the influence of that, you're really not too concerned about what happens next, rather than get paranoid, and you're more relaxed and enjoying the trip, huh?
Well, the thing of it is, with the drug of choice that I chose, it's the opposite. There's no paranoia. It's the opposite. It would be fear. You become fearless.
You become pronoic.
So yeah, that's exactly what I wanted, because I think heroin addiction and addiction is something that we're going to run into a lot more if it's an epidemic. And they would be the modern day leopards. I'm aware of that. There's really nothing worse than an active heroin addict. They will take everything. You can bolt it down and they're still going to take it. One of the things that you want to look for with a heroin addict, especially if they're actively using, is the only way I can get free from it for any time is when I'm honest about using it. Now, I know people that will go to great lengths to hide it, and that means they're not ready to stop. So that was one of the saving graces that I had. I really wanted to get off of it. And I've been off of it for several long periods of time, but it seems to come back. And I think one of the recent things that I've come across is PTSD keeps coming up more now than ever, and I'm not sure why, especially when I talk to counselors and it's on TV, there's ads online. And I had to go back to my childhood and realize, okay, well, what is it? Have I been traumatized? And when I go back to my childhood, there's definitely...
Can you go back there and give us kind of a rundown of your life since that time?
Absolutely. I don't know what it's like for other children, what their memories are when they were growing up. Maybe it's something happy. Their first memory is a birthday or a celebration. It could be anything. And what I'm not trying to do is have a pity party, and my life isn't any worse than anyone else's. But like I said, each person's experience is going to be, a certain amount. To them, it's going to be the worst thing that could happen to them. And at my age, I remember my first experience, my first memory when I go back would have been walking with my father. And I think I was probably around 2 years old. And he was walking me through the yard. I didn't really notice the gun in his hand, but he walked me back to a pen. There was a pig in the pen. And I know I didn't like the pig because it stank and it looked very ugly to me. But I didn't know what my father was going to do. I didn't know what a gun was at all. And all I see him do is put the barrel between the eyes of the pig, and he shot that gun, and it was so loud it stopped my heart. At least that's what it felt like. And then I saw that pig kicking and bleeding everywhere. And that's my first memory that I can remember. And it definitely rocked my world. I don't think I ever got over that, and I just wasn't ready for it. I don't know if I could have been ready for it, but that was one of the first memories that I have. And when I remember my childhood, I have a series of traumatizing events that come to my mind. I don't remember, the things that are happy. I don't remember much. I remember seeing drug use. I didn't know what it was at the time. I remember seeing hash and glass jars with match packs and cigarettes everywhere. I know I didn't like that. I remember seeing alcohol. But that wasn't traumatizing. But it would have been the never-ending experience of my father drunk and smashing the house and everything in it. At a young age, I felt like a combat zone. So that's what I remember my childhood. There's a lot of frightening moments, gripping fear. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Fear beyond measure. I knew something was wrong.
Yeah, for a child that age especially. And that was pretty much went throughout your childhood then in your family?
Up until I was 7 years old, it was a war zone like that. Just the constant, you knew it was going to happen, but you didn't know when. And it was regular up until I was 7 years old.
What happened?
Well, I believe my father, he caught a charge because I have a stepsister and he molested her and he went to prison. And that put an end to that for a long time. And I guess he got saved is what they were telling me. And I believe it. I definitely saw a change, but I also seen him go back when I was older. Now, just to back up a little bit, the most interesting thing about all those times that I was experiencing that fear, I just remember, the gospel came to me at a young age when I was about 2.5 years old. Jim Baker was on TV. My mom was a Christian, and she would always be in the Word and have it on TV. And I remember hearing about, Jesus Christ and him walking on water and the message of salvation, and I received it at a very young age. And that was something that I held on to. I do remember that. And that happened there again in the most traumatic times of my life. It was like I would come and turn, to the Savior. But the more I learned about it, the more I would try to apply. But the message was kind of obscure.
How old you are now?
Me, I'm 41.
41 years old. 41. So was your father in prison then after you were 7 years old? Maybe he was out of the picture for a while?
Yeah, he was gone from from the time I was 7 to around 12, 7 or 8. It took a while for him to go to jail, but because he had a lawyer and stuff. But my mom didn't leave him. However, that worked out.
Your mother stuck in there with him?
Yes, she did.
Would you like to continue on?
They say that people who have PTSD their drugs of choice are heroin and cocaine, and that has been my go-to when things are really bad. And ironically, I self-destruct when things are going really good. So I'm not sure where that comes from or why. And I've listened to some of your latest recordings with schizophrenia and stuff like that. I've been around people with that. I think anybody can pick up traits of that. But you can look at demon possession, you can look at anything. But I think if there's a root core of fear and that isn't dealt with, I think anyone with the amount of trauma at that young of an age, there's a root there, then I think that has to be dealt with.
How often does it get dealt with at an early age when you're a child, especially when you're growing up? I mean, hardly ever, unless you're in a privileged family or in a privileged position.
Right. There's been certain people that have tried to do a theophostic kind of ministry where they go back to your childhood.
Yes.
And I felt like I've had breakthroughs there. Mm-hmm. And then there's also just the part where maybe I like it. I don't know if it's necessarily a demon, as I've been told, that, for some reason, if you like to get high, then you like to get high. But the consequences aren't really worth it. But if there is a deeper issue, then that's something that I need to look at and deal with, because
Dr. Andrew Weil, in 1969, wrote a book. I actually got it right here. It's called The Natural Mind. He was doing work in the research of marijuana and illegal drugs, including LSD at that time. And he theorized that in all people, there was a natural propensity to get high. Part of the problem in our society was denying that that was the case, which would lead at that point to denial. You're not going to treat it. You're not going to do anything therapeutic about it because you didn't believe it's there. But if everyone has a natural propensity to get high, like he said, or to find the natural mind, including the natural painkillers that you process in your brain, then that being cut off is going to prohibit your development later on. You said PTSD a couple of times. Were you diagnosed with that?
I was given a mild dose of it and major. It was a pamphlet that I had to fill out, like a test. I don't know how honest I filled it out, but I was diagnosed with having serious pointers that are saying PTSD, which is ironic. I've been through a lot of counseling and never had anyone tell me that.
Were they able to pinpoint a source, like childhood or some particular aspect of your development that you might have gone through a situation that was so very horrifying that it lasted your whole life?
I never got that far, not with that counselor. I do believe that the amount of time that I spent in fear, because, you know, as I learned to live with that fear and the rage of my father, I did find substance at a young age. I taught myself how to huff gasoline. I taught myself how to huff glue and paint, and that would get rid of the fear at a young age. I remember that, and that lasted into my teens.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I remember there was a barn. He had a barn, and he would work on cars and stuff, and I found an ice cream bucket and some paint, and I liked the way it smelled, and I realized the more I smell it, the better I felt. So I would walk into the house, and there'd be a big green ring around my face, and my nose inside would be green, and my mom would be like, what were you doing? Because I was spraying paint. She never really picked up on it. My dad got us a three-wheeler, and I would take it out with my brother, just a little 50cc three-wheeler. We'd take it out in the woods, and I'd shut it off and take the gas cap off, and we would just sniff gas for hours and come back. Usually I'd try to wait until my father came back and had already through his episodes, and I could just kind of slide by him without catching any of that wherever he would direct it. You never know who was going to get it, but you knew somebody was going to get it.
Did you ever use a polyethylene bag to do that?
No, not regular. Just I know if that's the scientific name for rubber cement, yeah.
Well, I mean plastic bag. They put some cement or they put some fly spray or something into the plastic bag and breathe in and out of the bag to get high.
I've heard of that, and that would be the same concept. I've heard they do that for hunger pains as well, but yeah, definitely takes you on an interdimensional kind of ride.
How long did that last for you? A couple hours?
And that's the thing. How did I gravitate towards heroin? Well, everything else it lasts as long as you do it. As long as, if you're huffing it for 3 hours, then you're high for 3 hours. If you're drinking beer, you're feeling the effects of it as long as you're drinking, maybe an hour or two after you put it down, unless you drink like a madman. But I wasn't really into putting in all that work. When I discovered heroin, it was like, wow, I sniffed that and I'm high for 8 hours. This is what I've been looking for since I'm 3 years old. and that's that green light came on the very first time that I did it. And at that moment in time, I made kind of a covenant that this is the answer, and I'm going to commit myself to it. And I did very good at getting it and staying high on it.
I suppose you went to the needle after a while.
It didn't take very long, probably 2-3 months, and I had a family acquaintance that had been into that whole scene for a while. He wanted to shoot me up, and I was like, no, just let me see how you're doing it. So I watched him, and I learned and did it myself, and then I started doing that. I think I might have been 16, 17, and then I started looking at any other drug. If you didn't shoot it, to me, sniffing it, that was dirty. Like, why would you want to do that? I thought if you couldn't shoot it, I didn't want it. And that was my perspective.
You considered that a cleaner way to do it.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Not all that green stuff and black stuff coming out of your nose.
Yeah, basically the cut would be left in the spoon, stuff like that. And I thought it was, at that moment in time, I thought it was the way to go.
The time has come for a break. I'll see you on the other side. Here we are on the other side of Jackson SNYDER Presents. Beware.
At that moment in time, I thought it was the way to go. But I did have to come to grips that and that's what I mean. I started out with all those inhalants. I grew into marijuana, the cocaine. I did LSD. That wasn't it for me. I didn't like coming back to earth after taking that stuff. I did mushrooms. It wasn't my cup of tea. And when I did finally discover heroin, that was it. But I didn't see, and I had smoked pot heavily. That was always my go-to. Marijuana that was a daily, all day, every day. And if you didn't have it, you would be irritable and you would have a headache. But with the heroin, after you do it for a month straight and you don't have it, it's not a headache. It's like having the flu times 10. Your skin's crawling. You can't sleep. You're sweating. I mean, your body feels 100 times too heavy for you to carry. You can't get a shower. You can't eat. You'll throw up. You go into convulsions. And that was my introduction crash course to heroin addiction. And my parents found out when I had used a buddy's key to rob his house of a PlayStation or something, some video game system with games. I used a key and I still ended up getting charged with burglary, I think, 2 counts, because I did it twice. And so that was the beginning of my juvenile career. And then as I got into my 20s, I was never really into stealing from people. I always looked at, well, why do that when there's all these, Walmarts and Kmarts and they have all this stuff? They're not going to really miss it. So corporate America was my target. And I think I was just as addicted to stealing as I was to heroin. I got a rush from it. It made me happy. So there was a time, once a few rehabs, secular rehabs and everything. And then nothing really changed until I had gotten my girlfriend pregnant and had a child. And then I was like, okay, this ain't cool no more. I don't want to be the heroin addict father. It was something to care about besides myself. But that was the beginning of coming out of my little world. Actually, I wanted to come out of it for her, but that didn't work either.
Did you remain in school, or you drop out, or what happened there?
I quit school. I dropped out in 10th grade. I went to a rehab when I was 16, and they told me to test for my GED, and then they would tutor me. Well, I tested, and I passed the GED pre-exam, and then they were like, well, go take the test, and I took the test, and then when I was 18, I got that in the mail. Later on, I went to a VOTEC school for industrial maintenance and stuff like that. So, I mean, my education it's nothing extravagant, but I actually had a lady who told me she'd give me $500 to get my GED, and that was my motivator. I got my GED in that rehab. I got out, I went and got that money, and I went and got high.
That tells you you've got brains if you can just go right in and do that GED test. I used to do GED, man. There were very few people that could do that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I always failed school because of the homework, and I'd always do top of the class on the final exams, and that's how I passed every year. And then finally I just quit because there was just too much going on out there in 10th grade. I had a lot of anger problems when I was in school. I got expelled for trying to throw some kid off of the rail. Not sure what was going on there. Having a bad day, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
So, not that it's funny, but it's just going back that far, I seem to forget some of the things that, that I carried around.
Well, that's 23 years ago or so. Well, where do we go from there?
Where do we go from there? We go to a faith-based rehabs, which would have been through Teen Challenge several times. But if you go back to the man in the white robe, what he taught me came into play later. I had gone. I had a child, wanted to get right. Well, I went to a rehab, then I went to a halfway house. And when I was in the halfway house, they were saying stuff like find a higher power and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, well, I don't think I'm going to believe in a chair or a doorknob, because I remember asking one of the counselors, well, if you're higher power, where do you go to find out what your higher power wants you to do? And he didn't have an answer. And I was like, well, I can go right to the Bible and probably figure out something that's better than what I'm doing. He didn't like that either. So anyway, I had a counselor and I talked to them. And I remember that man said that he was Jewish and he believed in the Messiah. And so there was a little barn next to the evangelical church right down the road, and it said, "See the Abraham Messianic Congregation." And I knew it was some kind of Jewish believers in Jesus. And I said, well, if that place has any of the kind of love that man had, maybe I can go there, because I knew I had a higher power. I believe, at that time, I believed in God. I believed he had a son, but I was ready to throw out everything else, because I had tried going through so many different avenues with faith, and that didn't work either. But I just said, well, God, if you have a name, I don't know it, but if you reveal it to me, I believe in you and I believe in your son. And so I got permission to go down on a Saturday. I had to figure out when these people went to church. So I went down there on a Saturday. I got permission, and this old man came up to me and he had a copy of the Blue Scriptures, the ISR Blue Scriptures. And in the same day, I was introduced, I think he said Yahweh, which is Yod-Heh Vav-Heh with A, Yahweh, and Yahweh, he was saying, and I was like, that's cool, but what's that Bible you got? And I took the information down, and I wrote down that information and I ordered one. But that day I learned about the Saturday being the Sabbath, and he showed me some scriptures about the true name or the sacred name of the Creator. And I thought that was cool. I was looking for something different. And after I got out of that halfway house, he gave me a copy of Fossilized Customs, and I had been working somewhere, and I read that book, and it just kind of threw my whole faith. I thought, maybe I was doing something good, and I wasn't ready for all that. And I had just gotten taken to domestics and stuff like that for child support. I was on probation for something, and you know what? I was like, this is nice. I'll come back to this. I'm going to go get high. And I went out and I overdosed that day. And I think that was fentanyl too, back in 2004. And from there, I ended up going to jail, I think. And my probation officer was like, well, you need to do something. And I said, well, I want to go to the mission. And they were like, what do you mean you go to the mission? Because I knew there was a separation between church and state, and I'm pretty good at playing the system. Grew up in it my whole life, and I knew they couldn't have much jurisdiction over me if I could just get into a faith-based program. But I got in there, and things weren't going right, and I said, I got taken to domestics, and I was like, I'm trying to get help right now. I can't worry about that. So I knew they couldn't. I wouldn't have to pay child support if I went into Teen Challenge. So I went to Teen Challenge in Pittsburgh. Ended up doing 14 months there. But the key to that was that I had taken Fossilized Customs and the Blue Scriptures with me, and I had started studying that the whole time I was in their program. So I was learning everything they believed, their doctrines, and I was studying all the footnotes, and I was getting online, and I discovered this whole world of the Messianic Nazarene doctrines out there. And I had gotten convicted in 2004 about the Torah, about eating pork. I remember I fasted on Easter in 2004, and I never touched pork again on purpose. And I wish I could have that attitude about drugs, and I would do really well. It's just that I know pork isn't going to make me feel good. It does the opposite. But the drugs, they make me feel good when I have things that I'm trying to deal with. But I now know that that's just a lie.
How in the world were you able to pay any child support anyway with a drug habit like that and so much trouble in your life? Go to Walmart? Kmart?
Well, I didn't have a job on the books, and that was just something to make my life more difficult. She ended up forgiving me that whole day when I got out of Teen Challenge. And then after I got out of there, I had started to do drywall. I got a career. I started making decent money for somebody, my age. Or with my background, let's say my background, I became successful in what I was doing. It was kind of hard work, but it paid good. I got married and had more children. Did good, except I was drinking alcohol, and that led to my demise as well. So I think my whole thing is just surrender, to completely surrender things and go there. But like I said, there's been times where Yahweh intervened. There's times that he touched me tremendously, and I'm even scared of him when he takes control. I'm kind of in a box here, and I know I don't want to die. I know I don't want to leave my children looking, leave that hole there, because I did a lot of drugs with kids that said, well, my dad died on heroin. And then I look at them and there they are shooting drugs with me. I'm thinking, I can't do that to my children. So this last time I just prayed, I know I'm not what you want me to be. I just have mercy on me, and I'll do what you want me to do. Just I don't want my children to I don't want to go this way. I didn't want the generational curse to fall on them, because I believe that it would. And so I'm here, and once again, I'm indebted. But throughout my life, had I been Yahweh, I would have done off me a long time ago. But I'm not sure why it goes against all my theology.
You're in rehab now? The program?
Yeah, it's called Life Builders. It's like every mission, I think, in the United States is run by Baptists. Yeah. And they have a good, they got their Bible take on things, and they live the Bible better than I do when I'm doing what I do.
How many children do you have right now, and what's your marital status?
My marital status is not good, and I have four children, and I'm in the middle of a divorce or something like that. Yeah.
Are you able to be in contact with those children?
Yeah, when she can put up with me.
Okay. I met you 10 years ago now. When I first met you and your family, I was amazed, because I had come to where you were to talk about Essenism, and here you and your family were all dressed up in linen. And I thought at the time, these guys must be real Essenes. They've got all this linen. They must have paid a fortune for it. And I asked you where you got the linen. You said you hang out at the Goodwill store, and I don't think you had ever heard of what an Essene was at the time. Yet you were dressed exactly like one. That blew my mind.
Absolutely. I met you trying to save my marriage at that time. The history there is I've been carrying this around, and sometimes you just know things ain't right. But I think that was my last issue here too. But going back to that time, yeah, I had been in I think it was 2006. I graduated the Teen Challenge, and by the time that I got out of there, I knew what the name was, and I knew I should be practicing the Torah, the feasts, and so I started to do that. I came across a plethora of materials that I started studying, and I didn't think I came across any of your stuff except the Shabbat liturgy, which I actually preferred to use. Interestingly enough, when I met you, that's what I was using, and started to practice it. And I had been in the Sacred Name churches, and then started learning about the Nazarene movement. I think I went solar lunar. Somewhere I learned about the linen dress. I don't think anybody really knew what the Essenes were at that time. I didn't know much about Qumran or anything. And so yeah, at that time I was applying what I could learn.
What you been doing since then? Because I haven't heard from you for years. What's been going on?
Well, I had tucked into a ministry, and kind of did the best I could there with the circumstances. Things weren't working out, but I have been practicing Torah. I learned a lot about the solar calendar. I learned more about these seeds, but or the Zadokite priesthood, things like that. It's just, these are all the things that are dear to my heart. It's just I never really, I guess maybe I isolate. I had always had family problems, marital problems. I have a beautiful children. I have a hard time raising them. I guess maybe if I have issues such as PTSD or depression, things like that. I don't know, it seems to have popped up, and I held on as long as I could. I made it for years, but they weren't always happy times. But sometimes you gotta hit bottom to get a true assessment. And it's times like this that I've gotten the closest to Yahweh, and I've made mistakes of picking back up, and I realize it's the little things that take me out in the end, such as tobacco. The kind of call that I have, or what Yahweh wants from me, is one of complete abstinence, complete surrender. Mm-hmm. And I've struggled with that since the beginning, because it's asking me to give up my it's the only thing I know that is my backup plan. If this doesn't work, I know something that will. And so for me, that's a struggle.
Let me ask you one more question, then I want to see what the other people have to say. It sounds to me like you've been through all kinds of different programs, all kinds of different ups and downs, down to the point of crashing, even to the very edge of losing your life. I think that you said that when you're doing the best, that's when you fell the hardest. Did you ever think of going into a career in helping others? I know that's one thing you could get into fairly easily. I knew a teen challenge director that went through something very similar to what you're talking about until he got about your age. And then it all turned around when he actually went into that himself. And as far as I know, that's 30 years ago, he's probably still in that. That's what kept him sober, to be in the program all the time.
Absolutely. That is something that I've always looked at, except I've had children and a family to provide for, and I let that pull me out. Although this time, if there's really no family there, then I'm pretty free to do that.
Sometimes that's the case.
Right.
Sometimes you are separated for a reason to fulfill your calling and your place in destiny, and you might consider that. Now, anybody else? Let's ask him some questions if you have them.
Yes. Teen Challenge, that was founded by Nikki Cruz, wasn't it?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the cross and the switchblade.
No, I actually know him personally. But here's what I want to know. When you came into the movement, you talked about your experiences dealing with this drugs. What was your experience after you came into the movement with regards to this? Did you find that the movement was able to assist you, or did you find more assistance in the churches such as the Teen Challenge organizations? Where did you find most of your help? Well,
the abstinence part is unbeatable when it comes to programs, because they're holding your hand, and it's not easy to use drugs in a program. The place I'm at right now is pretty much the same way, although there's a lot of opportunity. If you want to play around, you can, but I know where that gets you. The thing that helped me the most was about the movement was it was not just a faith, it was a lifestyle change. From eating to the days that you worship to the ways that you dress, you could dive right in and lose your old self, and that made the scripture more real to me than anything. I mean, because I can sit here and call myself an addict, or I can call myself a new creation, and I can be a son of the light, or I can identify with the darkness. So the thing about the movement is to me, it became my identity. The problem is when I was still drinking alcohol and fighting things that I couldn't let go, or unforgiveness, bitterness, fear. So I'm walking around, I still have root issues, but I'm learning all this stuff. And so it's love-hate that I got clean, but you only get so far just from abstaining. There's root problems, and I don't know if either place actually helped that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, did you do any psychotherapy, anything like that? The secular world says we'll get to the root of those problems. I think you said you did a little bit there.
Yeah, I did some of that, but the best results I had were the theophostic stuff. For people who might not know what that is kind of like you go back and revisit these traumatizing moments in your life, and you see how the creator was there the whole time. It's healing, it's imagery, I don't think it's conjuring anything or witchcraft.
By definition, it's like acknowledging the true source of your inner pain and then finding your peace through some personalized truth directly from a deity or higher power.
Absolutely.
Does that sound about right?
Absolutely, yeah. And that I have had a lot of breakthrough with that. And like I'm saying, when you go back and look at my periods of using and not using, they have been going from, like I told you before, I got out of rehab and I'd be high the same day. And throughout the years, I have actually managed to get up to 5 years clean from my drug of choice, but it doesn't mean that I wasn't drinking alcohol or anything. But even for me to get off of heroin that long, that to me, that's mind-blowing. I never thought I could get 5 days without it. So,
anybody else?
The last place you were at, how did that help or not help? Was it more about, to quote it, I guess, Gnostic? Did you learn more? Did it actually help you with this fight that you're having, this struggle? I'm familiar with the place you were at.
No, it was good in some ways, and in some ways it was overbearing. The last time that I bit the dust here, I'm going to say that it was more of a conscious decision to pick up and use, because my life circumstances, I don't believe it had anything to do with anything from my childhood. It had to do with just me being burnt out, sensing something's off in a bunch of areas, and I just made a really bad decision that I was going to deal with it the way that I used to deal with it. And in this case, it almost took my life. And now I realize that wasn't a good idea. It wasn't the right way to handle it. Although I was trying to handle it several different ways, and I just kept getting shut down circumstantially. And eventually I was like, well, the dope man isn't going to say no. So eventually that's what I did. But the doors the harder I tried to do the right thing, the more problems I had trying to do it. Ironic as that is, it's not an excuse, but that was my reality. And by that time, I had a lot of responsibility on me. I won't go into details, but I got burnt out pretty good and hard and just fed up.
What about a strict atmosphere, religious atmosphere? Does that put more pressure on or take more pressure off? I know for me, it would put more pressure on.
You know, I'm built for that, but my family wasn't. So that created a lot of problems. I think that I think I do really well under that kind of pressure. It's just, I don't know if you want to call it rigid asceticism, but yeah, to me, that sounds really appealing to me compared to what I've been doing. And I always call that kind of discipleship is something that I was looking for, where not as in discipline. I remember asking a guy about that kind of discipleship, and he said, well, we don't discipline you. I'm like, you totally missed what I was saying. I was looking for something.
You need to have a partner or a guide or somebody that's solid. It seems easier when you're away from the daily grind of family and all, but it seems to me, in my experience, unless there's somebody there that you can acknowledge as your mentor, so you're going to fall right off again.
It's possible. It's kind of strange because there's not many people that I look up to as being that.
Does anybody else have a question or comment before I pose the last one?
I would just like to say, if I may, just thank you so much for your testimony. It just is so apparent that we live in a fallen world, and the only thing that helps lift any of us up out of crises in our lives is that theophostic, that light of God that shows us that He's the only way out of our mess, and He's our hope. So I just thank you for your testimony.
Amen. Thank you.
There's always a huge risk here, a huge risk. And when people will come forward to talk about their problems in life with the intention of aiding other people who are either dealing with themselves or with family or loved ones, well, that's risky business. We don't know who's going to hear this and what a person that might hear it might be doing with it. So indeed, thank you very much. And just as an ending, what is your theophostic outlook on, say, the upcoming year?
Definitely to deal with the root issues, and then in turn learn how to help other people with the same problem. That's been heavy on my heart. Is you really have to. You can only get what you get, and you get what you get. So I feel like that will be my outlet, and I'm not going to let any outside influences and responsibilities take me from that, because if they do, if there's no me, there's no problem. There's no answer either. There's no answer either. There's no answer either. There's no answer either.
But there is an answer.